Welcome everybody to this webinar on the CulturalRoad project from the European Union. So today we are going to have in this webinar we are going to talk about the co-creation of mobility solution with the local community. And this is a webinar about insights from the CulturalRoad project. And the CulturalRoad project is an Horizon Europe research and innovation action funded from the European Union, which is focused especially on connected, cooperative, and autonomous mobility, and to especially understand how can we use in an optimal way these solutions while considering the diversity of culture and needs that we have in Europe and beyond. So, first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Guido Cantelmo. I am the technical coordinator of Working Package 3 of the project, which is essentially where these co-creation activities take place. I'm from the Technical University of Denmark. And today I'm going to walk you through this webinar, which is divided essentially into three parts. First, I'll just like to talk a little bit about co-creation and to talk a little bit about the CulturalRoad vision for co-creation and participation. But then most of the time, actually, I'm going to give the word to my colleagues from the CulturalRoad project, which I will introduce later, which are actually the people who make this process, this co-creation possible in the first place. And we are going to have 10 minutes at the end where everybody from the audience is invited to actually make questions if you have any curiosity. Just for the record, this, as you might know, because it was, you probably received a little warning at the beginning, this webinar is actually recorded. So yeah, just for you to know. As I mentioned before, I actually would like to leave most of the time to my colleagues to talk, but first I'd like just to have a very brief note on what is co-creation and what is co-creation in the CulturalRoad project. So as I mentioned, CulturalRoad focus on connected, cooperative, autonomous vehicle. And this is a very complex ecosystem because on one hand, this is a new technology that promises to provide solutions that are tailor-made and to the needs of local populations and local stakeholders. But on the other hand, we know very well that for these technologies to succeed, we need, of course, to have critical mass. We need the possibility to deploy it in large-scale ecosystems, and we need common standards. So in CulturalRoad, we see participatory planning and co-creation as the key to successfully deploy this new technology in Europe, considering that we have a very heterogeneous system of countries with different social norms, different geography, different culture, different problems. So the idea is that we want to use participatory planning co-creation to, on one hand, develop solutions that work at the local level and that empower policymakers to achieve their goals. But on the other hand, we want to ensure this cross-country operability. So we don't make it tailor-made to a specific context in a way that prevents replicability in other realities. And the way we try to achieve this is by using what we call a two-step co-creation framework, where we bring to the table all of the stakeholders involved in this CCAM ecosystem. So in the first step of this co-creation framework, we bring together everybody but the end user. So we have policymakers, service providers, technology providers, citizen association, and we try to understand what are the needs of each of the different stakeholders and whether we can develop solutions that align all the different needs. Once that we have developed this coherent solution, then in the second step, we engage the local citizens, the end users, and we essentially try to understand if these needs indeed is also meeting their need at the local level. The vision is that this two-step co-creation framework is developed mostly for policymakers and regulators. So the idea is that if there is a regulator who wants to implement certain policies or has a certain vision for CCAM, they should be the one to engage the stakeholders so that they can get this feedback and use it directly and actively in the design of new policies. And this is where participation and co-creation step in, Co-creation means that we can directly engage the stakeholders in actually creating solutions, but we can also use this system only for participatory planning, so just engaging citizens so their feedback can be used in the policy making. In this project, we are testing this approach in 5 different regions. At the city level, we have Eilat and Karlsruhe, where we use this co-creation framework to develop solutions for the city. At the regional level, we have Barcelona and Ljubljana, where we develop solutions at the regional level. And finally, we have the largest testing areas, which is the West Midlands and Oxfordshire in the United Kingdom, where the dimension is regional, but with actually implication at the national level. And what we are trying to do is to use this use this co-creation framework, first of all, to identify who are the relevant stakeholders, but second of all, to understand what are their needs and try to essentially align these needs and ultimately transform the output of this process into long and short-term deployment plan, whether it is through deployment roadmaps or white papers or business model canvases. In the Cultural Road project, we are focusing specifically on the integration of autonomous vehicle and public transport. So most of our implementation focus on use of shuttle buses or autonomous taxis, and we try to focus on an heterogeneous social and geographical context, which means we, of course, look at commuters, but also low-income and vulnerable users in terms of social background. But also, we don't look only at urban core, but we actually try to also understand what happens outside the city. In terms of methods, our co-creation approach essentially works with focus groups. We have workshops, which are essentially focus group with the stakeholders, in which we probe the stakeholders in specific points that are common to all of our demonstration sites. We look at accessibility and barriers from a political point of view. We look at actually accessibility and barriers from a technological point of view. And of course, we had a specific focus on how CCAM create opportunity for public transport. When it comes to the end users, the focus groups instead were focusing more on the psychological factors, essentially fear of automation, acceptance of these unknown technologies, use cases, when would people feel comfortable using these services and when they find it beneficial, and also very important for us, service design features, which type of elements are important within an autonomous vehicle for the users to use it. So this is actually it for the introduction of the Cultural Road project. I don't want to spend more time talking about this because I'll actually like to introduce the next speakers of this webinar. And these are the people who really made possible actually this co-creation approach. So I'd like to welcome, in alphabetical order, Spila from the Regional Development Agency of Ljubljana, Ruth from the Oxfordshire County Council, Xavier from the Transport Authority of the Metropolitan Area of Barcelona, Maximilian from the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, and Janev from the municipality of Eilat. And these are the people that, together with other people in our team, made possible to explore this concept in real life in the Cultural Road project. And I prepare a few questions, so I think I will directly move to them, starting from, well, in the Cultural Road project, which I just presented, of course, we have a very strong focus on co-creation and on citizen engagement. We actually, as I mentioned, the Cultural Road project assumed that this is really central for the development of essentially solutions that are widely appreciated. But of course, the question is, how relevant do we think is it to engage citizens when deploying CCAM solution? And of course, what about engaging the other solutions, the other stakeholders? And maybe I would like to invite Spila to answer this question from your experience at the regional level in Ljubljana. What do you think is relevant or not?
So good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, just to give a bit of a context, we've done, like in the past few months, we conducted 2 focus groups with several different target groups. In one focus group, there was elderly people and people with disabilities. And in another one, there was students and young employees. And we think that that citizens' engagement is really important, even in this early stage, as we in Slovenia, in Ljubljana, we do not have autonomous vehicles operating in practice yet. So our focus groups were not about testing real user experience. They were more about understanding how people imagine this kind of mobility, what expectations they have, also what concerns them. So it was really interesting that people didn't really focus on the technical side as much as we might expect, but more they were asking very practical questions like, would this actually make my daily mobility easier? Would I feel safe using it? Would it be affordable? And would it work for different groups of people? So that was very useful for us because it showed that successful deployment is not only about technical readiness, and it's also about whether people understand the purpose of the service and trust that it responds to their needs. So, of course, it doesn't involve only, so this engagement does not only involve citizens, but also stakeholders. We conducted also a stakeholder workshop that was equally important because we invited local authorities, mobility experts, and they brought more systemic perspective about what infrastructure is needed, what are the regulations, what is the long-term planning. So I would say that the value of co-creation is very important and to bring all these different perspectives together.
Thank you very much, Spila. And maybe Janev, I know if you also have the same feeling about engagement and whether you can share some of what you learned also in the case studies, in the case in ALAT.
Hey everybody, thank you, Guido. Well, first of all, broad use of autonomous transportation will be a major breakthrough causing disruption and unpredictable effects. At first glance, we can expect a reduction in travel costs, accident, traffic congestion, and insurance cost, for example. On the face of it, CCAM can change the vehicle ownership model. Okay, vehicle will become less about brand and more about function, and more about comfort, less need for parking, change in movement pattern, and even shift in real estate. Okay, and so the co-creation give us the ability to see and to hear what people needs, not only like the end user, also the stakeholder, and to introduce them the really, I would say, the really problem or the really obstacle that they need to consider. So basically, it's a win-win situation.
Thank you a lot, Janev. And maybe as a last comment, I'd like to ask maybe Maximilian also, if you like to comment on that more specifically, because my feeling is that often CCAM are very discussed in a very abstract way. So whether you think that essentially co-creation can help this a little bit more to reality.
Yes. So thank you and hello everyone. So I also think that CCAM is often discussed through very abstract promises. And we also saw in our workshops we did with citizens that citizens can really help to identify where expectations are realistic, where concerns remain, and where the technology or service may not yet match local needs. So engagement can also reveal practical requirements early, such as maybe perceived safety, reliability, accessibility, and even transparency. So from a cultural perspective, This is especially relevant because CCAM should not be deployed as an isolated technology, but as part of our local mobility system here in Karlsruhe. And looking at the stakeholder perspective, we also saw that many stakeholders, like mobility service providers, mentioned regulatory challenges, and even employees were rather concerned that they lose their job when we need no drivers anymore with autonomous vehicles.
Thank you, Maximilian. I agree, but I think I will move with this actually to the next question, which is probably for me a bit the elephant in the room of the Cultural Road project, which is I don't think anybody ever argued on the fact that citizen engagement is important. But a question that I have myself is, given our experience, we know how much work was about citizen engagement. So do you think essentially is the best approach, and do you think it's feasible to do this citizen engagement in a systematic way? And maybe in this, I'll like Yaniv to ask to you what you think especially about this, the role of this scaling up, this engaging citizens and the need of it.
Well, I can see it, systematically engagement of citizen is, well, it's a necessary component. Introducing new technology like CCAM sometimes leads to public frustration or low adoption rate, if we not handle it correctly. So therefore, early engagement of the citizen can prevent the public frustration that I said and ensure higher adoption rate of new mobility technology. The best thing to do to engage people is to provide them platform for them to speak alongside the stakeholders, like the professionals. Okay, and this approach can build trust and can help identify blind spots and hidden barrier, like early in the process. And a good way to do this is by presenting potential solution and gathering the feedback from the city, and like what will work, what they think it's work, what they think it's not work, and you can see on their faces what they think is good and what they see that is not. Sometimes you can like talk and explain about it, and then they get it and they change their mind. But if not, maybe you need to think differently and try to find another solution. So using this process is a better option to understand the opinion from the solution of pools. So to summarize, I want to say that it's important always to give citizens a voice and a space to express their opinion, and to let them feel that they are relevant and not just overshadows by all the professional around them. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Yaniv. I agree entirely. And since this is a difficult questions, I don't know if I will invite either somebody from the regional level, so either Spiel or Xavier, to comment also on the scalability of this approach, right? Because I think the problem is to have this focus group at a larger scale. Is it feasible? Did you experience a problem with that?
Regarding the first question, because I was thinking about it's feasible. I don't know if it's feasible. I think it's needed, or it's necessary. This engagement and this systematically engagement. We have a very good position because we have a legal framework where our mobility law defines some kind of councils or spaces of participation of not the final citizen, because it's quite complicated, but some kind of representative from unions, from neighbors, from business representative, all these kinds. And in this forum, we can hear their voices and their opinions regarding CCAMs or other things. So for us, it's very useful. But when we need to reach maybe the final citizen, as we did within the project, for us, at least from our experience, you are spending a lot of time, but it's very useful because you can see sometimes things that you didn't pay attention. In our case, we developed two focus groups, one with senior citizens and the rest one and the other one with newcomers, some kind of profile that we are arriving in Barcelona, that they don't have high digital skills, or they don't speak Catalan, either Spanish. So it's a part of the population that they are living in a conditions that they are very linked to the public transport because they don't have a driver license, they don't have the affordability to pay a car. And it's important to hear from them what they think about these innovative solutions. So, and to make to escalate these solutions, for us it's important this kind of projects, European projects, because we can have the time, the budget to develop these procedures, because if not, it's quite complicated for us.
Thank you very much, Xavier. Unless some of the other speakers would like to step in, I think we can then move to maybe the next question, which I think is the other elephant in the room. We mentioned about co-creation, and we mentioned about the use of CCAM in public transport. So I think the next crucial question that we decided to discuss today is why do we expect autonomous vehicle, connected and comparative autonomous mobility, to be more specific, to solve mobility problem that we cannot solve with conventional public transport? And maybe for this one, I would like Maximilian to invite you to the table, since you've been working and researching in many years this technology, actually.
Yes, this is true. So CCAMs can complement public transport where conventional systems have structural limitations. We see this here in Karlsruhe as well. So CCAM could help by offering more flexible, demand-responsive services in areas or time windows where fixed line public transport is difficult to operate effectively. So from a citizen perspective, the question is not whether CCAM is technological impressive, but whether it solves a concrete everyday mobility gap.
Thank you, Maximilian. And maybe Ruth, do you actually think that CCAMs can play a role in this sense to create a more inclusive public transportation system?
Absolutely, I think they can play a role. The potential advantage of CCAMs is that actually they can be different sized vehicles. So they might be able to get to places where actually a traditional sort of single decker or double decker bus can't get to. It may be as part of a multimodal journey. So an example that I sometimes give is that CCAM can be part of that community transport. Maybe that there's some sort of service that operates around a village, but also connects up to either the nearest railway line or main public transport route, and possibly that this that the vehicle could, even wait and act as a bus stop on a main road, so that the passengers don't actually get wet while they're waiting for their main service to come along. So no, there are many ways in which CCAM can actually contribute to our existing services.
Thank you. And maybe on this point, if I can invite you, the Spila, also to comment. And I was wondering if you can comment on whether, in your experience, in the experience in Ljubljana, people expect public transport to be replaced by CCAMs, but also if there was, any fear, any negativity of replacing public transport with CCAM?
Yes, well, what we saw in our focus groups were that people were quite critical of the idea that autonomous vehicles or autonomous mobility is automatically an improvement. So some participants questioned whether it could actually create, like these autonomous vehicles could create new problems like more traffic, higher costs, solutions that mainly benefit people who already have good mobility options. And I think that is quite a fair concern, because the discussion showed that people see value only if automated mobility addresses very specific gaps. So the strongest use cases were things like solving the first and last mile connections, improving, for example, accessibility for elderly people, for those who do not have a driving license. Maybe AV vehicles would be serving areas where traditional public transport is difficult to operate efficiently. So there was also some recognition that driver shortage are becoming a real challenge, and maybe the autonomy could help there. So I think the key lesson was that CCAM should not be seen as replacing public transportation, but it should be strengthening mobility, public mobility, where existing systems face limitations. Yeah.
Thanks. I think I agree with that for sure. So maybe we can move then to the fourth questions for today. So essentially, we talk a lot about CCAM as a technology, and we talk, of course, about acceptance. But regarding of the vehicle and regarding of the users, of course, when we talk about I would say connected and cooperative autonomous mobility, right? There is the connected and cooperative that I think very often is forgotten when we talk about deployment this technology. So the first question is, when it comes to your experience, are there also concrete investment plans for developing the infrastructure, and what are essentially the visions for moving from essentially small scale pilots to large scale deployment from a point of view of the infrastructure? And maybe Xavier, I would like to start from you, since I think that in Catalonia you have a roadmap vision. So whether how this play a role at all?
Yeah. Well, I think that the vision is necessary, and I will tell you why. Because, Catalonia has a vision, but then when we are going into the region of Barcelona, that it's about 75% of population of Catalonia, our vision is aligned with the regional, with this Catalan vision. And why do we need? Because sometimes who is responsible for tendering the new public transport system, who is eligible to be a CCAM or wherever, is not the same responsible who is maintaining the infrastructure, and it's not the same responsible who is providing the 5G solution that some connected cars need. So this vision or this map, it's needed because all the different actors must be aligned with the same goal. And because we have a limited budget, if we need to invest in infrastructure, we need to define which areas are our priorities. And all these different stakeholders must agree with these priority areas or priority services that we want to implement. Linked to the previous question, in our focus groups, I was very happy because all people, they don't talk about road taxis. They talk about buses, public transport, automated public transport. So, and it's the gap that we think we need to solve, because we don't want to change normal cars for autonomous cars, because we are going to have the same problems. the congestion, pollution, all these kind of things. Even if they are electrics, that we have a lot of local pollutants that they don't come from the combustion. They come from the other parts of the vehicle. So. And we need to be sure that, for example, one priority area could be rural areas where we are having a lack of drivers. It's difficult to implement some kind of public transport because we need flexibility, we need these DRT solutions, and these areas could be the most interesting areas where we can implement the CCAMs. So the different stakeholders with this vision must be aligned with these priorities, and then we can invest in infrastructure, technology. I think both in parallel, no one first and the other second one. So this is the approach from the region of Barcelona.
Thank you very much, Xavier. And maybe I'll invite at this point Ruth also to comment on that, since UK is essentially the largest and most ambitious in terms of geographical coverage demonstration areas we try to work with. The question is, of course, the same. What's the vision for infrastructure and investment, but also whether it is clear which type of infrastructure and which type of investment are needed when we look at such a scale.
Yeah, and in the UK, local transport authorities are actually supported by the Department for Transport in helping us find the funds to do a lot of this work. Now, creating physical infrastructure out there on the roads actually can be quite challenging for many cities. And places we don't necessarily have the space to add in extra lanes just for autonomous transport, so maybe making use of bus lanes as well. But that digital connectivity, digital infrastructure side of things is really important to enable citizens to understand when they're to be able to book their journey, to be able to know where the vehicle is, to be able to pay, all sorts of things like that. And then we have the other side of things, and particularly in the UK, that as local transport authorities we're being encouraged to do, is to provide other forms of digital intelligent transport systems. So thinking about everything that we provide to the connected user, to the connected vehicle, such as in-vehicle messaging, looking at bus priority and all temporary speed limit changes, roadworks information, incident information, that all of these types of things that could be received by the connected user when they're out traveling will also be able to be received by the connected vehicle.
Thank you, Ruth. I agree, and I think if I'll elaborate myself only on 1 second in this, I think I think this is very important, because the short version is that if we think about, for example, developing services for rural areas, for example, or if we imagine developing in the city center, that's very different. Another cost, for example, I only recently, and that's I realize is a big difference, is that autonomous vehicles tend to be much smaller, right? So then there are also other costs and other externalities to consider, that sometimes I have the feeling many initial research tend to be very optimistic on this cost. And not consider the huge risk of investing a lot of money at the beginning with a higher uncertainty later down the road. But
and I think in some ways around that physical infrastructure side of things, our road markings are not always going to be perfectly white. maintenance needs to happen out on our road network and things. And actually, what happens when there isn't necessarily as much money around to be able to do these things, because government spending may have to focus on other areas. So we actually need to make sure that there are digital forms of high definition mapping that actually matches the physical environment that we can share to enable these services to happen in the future.
Thank you a lot, Ruth. And I think this is a very good introduction for the next question, which anyway I wanted to ask you. I think at least, yes, what do you think is in this sense the role of regulators in CCAM deployment, right? Because technology and infrastructure is one hand, but we have, of course, of the regulators as well.
I mean, we're in some ways quite fortunate in the UK that we have the Automated Vehicles Act of 2024, and this starts to set out what is involved in terms of regulation and legislation. So a key role is around ensuring the functional safety of the vehicles that are going to be being used and testing. So in the same way that that your car is currently type approved, then actually these vehicles will also have type approval. How they're going to be used will also be covered by the regulation. New ways of licensing vehicles. So normally for a taxi or for a bus, for a taxi, you're licensing the driver, but there won't be a driver. So how do these things change? Instant investigation. So it may be that the local police force is currently involved in any collision investigations. But how do you interview the automated driving system? So there's got to be ways in making sure that data is available and in human readable formats. And also sort of, there needs to be that thing of how do we stop an automated driving system or entity from continuing to drive if they aren't as safe as we feel that they should be. I think these are all really important ways in which actually regulation needs to be applied, but regulation shouldn't be a barrier to innovation.
Thank you. And well, of course, everybody here is welcome. To comment at any time, I will have one specific question for Maximilian, and I would like you to ask if you can play a little bit the advocate of the devil here, because a specific thing in Karlsruhe is that you are working a lot also with an industrial company in it. They are not developers of autonomous technology, but of course there is this perspective also of the other side, right? What governors should do to promote this type of technology to actually flourish in the European Union.
Mm-hmm. So one thing to say is what we saw in our stakeholder workshops is that our transport experts emphasized the need for a harmonized regulatory framework across Europe for automated vehicles. So the current, let's say, regulatory patchwork makes it actually quite difficult to transfer these pilot projects we have in many different cities across Europe to other regions, to countries, etc. So this creates unnecessary barriers for operators, public transport authorities, also for INIT and other manufacturers, and even for research projects. So regulators should therefore define clear rules for approval, liability, safety validation, data exchange, and so on. So without such harmonization, I think in Europe we would risk having many different, very promising pilot projects, but we would have a limited practical deployment beyond local test environments. And our experts actually emphasized on those concerns that we need more European regulations on those things.
Thank you, Maximilian. Unless anybody wants to jump in the arena, I think we have two more questions and we are in perfect time. So the first one is a bit biased, is from my side. Did you learn something unexpected during the process? Which for me is like, was all this exercise and time spent in the Cultural Road useful somewhat? And maybe Spila, you can share your experience from your focus groups first.
I mean, yes, of course, it's something unexpected. What surprised me the most was how thoughtful people were, even though none of them have really a direct experience with autonomous mobility in Slovenia. I truly expected more uncertainty or maybe more resistance to the idea. Especially, nevertheless, we have to remember that our focus groups were conducted with elderly people. But actually people engage with it in very serious, quite critical way. They were asking questions about fairness, accessibility, sustainability, who would actually benefit from these systems. So it was really interesting to see. And another thing that stood out was that many participants were actually more positive about shared autonomous mobility than private autonomous cars like taxis. And they often saw stronger value in autonomous mobility as part of a public transportation rather than having another private ownership model. So it showed basically that people are very open to innovation, but they want to understand its public value. They want a clear answer to a very simple question, like what problem does this solve and who does it solve it for? So I think our focus groups were the answers were very valuable for us.
Thank you a lot. And in that sense, maybe I'll also ask Yaniv to have some comments, because what I was very surprised for your results is that I perceive reading your notes that was very positive, the feedback in Israel.
Yeah, exactly. I really was surprised, not only from the stockholder that they really want to, they really want this technology to come and to be, and we want this right now. This is the future. Okay. And in the focus group that we did a focus group for also elderly people and also for tourists, lot of kind of tourists, some with disability, some parents, some we try to take from all of the range. And except when they think about CCAM technology, they say the first thing they say, it's the future, it's not possible. And then they show, no, I will not get inside this vehicle without a driver. It's it's crazy. But then all this hesitation and fear turn down while you're talking to them. You explain a little bit, you tell them how it works, and maybe tell them, look, it's already applying in other places. And then they become eager. Oh, I really want to try it. I really want to try, really. It's going to help me. So this is something that we really like. I was surprised that the instant they realized what is technology, and they were eager immediately to use this, to try and use it.
Thank you. And actually, this brings me as a small self-reflection that this is very aligned with what has been observed in the scientific literature, because apparently it's been measured there is a big gap between the willing to accept this technology from people that never use it and the same people after experiment the first time. So So I think there is some hope that things will get easier down the road as this technology get more mature. But we have 5 minutes left, so I left actually the most important questions for last, probably. So we discuss all the elephants in the room, like infrastructure, automation, the scalability of co-creation, and how much fun we had. But I think one of the big question is equity when it comes to this technology, which is quite expensive. So the essentially question is, there is a lot of hype about this technology, how we can make public transport more equitable. But again, is it guaranteed that this technology will make the public transport equitable? And vice versa, what can we do as policymakers, as practitioners, as scientists, to make sure that it is equitable once it is deployed? And maybe, Yanni, I'll actually ask you to also take this one to begin with.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. You left it to the end. So my answer to this is not necessarily like equity is like it can become faster, but it's not guarantee. Like CCAM cannot guarantee equity. The economic of this technology is actually make it much easier to achieve. Think about this way: the biggest ongoing cost in the transportation today is the driver. Okay, when you take the driver out of the equation, operating costs drop significantly. So this open up some really cool possibilities for self-founding models. Like take the marine shuttle, for example, that we try to promote here in Eilat. Okay, and for example, if you have tourists that want to go to water park that found in the other side of the city, okay, so the park itself could offer some subsidized ticket for the shuttle, and this is a win-win situation. And like the park will have more visitor, and the tourists get the ability to transfer with a low cost and not pay for the taxi, for example. So this kind of like if you lower the cost, you can basically do different business model that can increase your fleet and can bring more opportunities for a cooperation with other companies, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Yaniv, maybe Xavier, I don't know if you want also a little bit to comment on this, especially since, again, you have this deployment plan that is regional in Catalonia. How are you addressing this aspect, or are you addressing it?
Well, all mobility actions, not just CCAMs that we develop, we want to try to guarantee the equity, and we are going to do the same with the CCAMs. And again, I think I mentioned before in my previous intervention, it depends on the model that we are going to decide to implement. If we just decide, okay, robotaxis wherever they want, or to be implemented where they can earn money, like very business approach. If it's just this, maybe then the only people that can use robotaxis or these CCAMs are people who are paying right now for a taxi that we know that could be expensive or whatever. But if we decide to implement this kind of solutions in these rural areas to improve these DRT systems or these kind of solutions, I think that we can guarantee and maybe we can improve the equity. So it depends on the model. I think it's not just the technology, and this maybe is a part of the solution, because we need to ensure digital gaps or all these kind of things. But at least from the point of view of the size, the kind of service that we want to offer to the citizens, we can guarantee the equity or not.
Thank you. And then we are actually on a perfect timing. So if somebody has a very quick note from the speakers, otherwise I might have a closing remark on that. That's in our work within this project for public transport network design. We've actually been seeing that sometimes it's exactly as you say, it's not about autonomous or not autonomous, it's just to design solutions that are essentially equitable by design. So I do agree that it's about taking a step back and not about thinking about CCAM, but thinking about equity of the old system. So thank you a lot, Xavier, for this comment. And as I say, we are actually at the end of the roundtable. So I'd really like to thank all the speakers. I'll clap it, even though we are online. And actually like to invite anybody from the audience that might have a question for any of us, either from the technique or from the specific insights or comments, then we are happy to answer. And I don't have an overview of the chat, so. Okay. So I suspect there are no questions. So maybe I will then make one more question and then call it a day, unless there are any other questions from the audience in the meantime, which is, and this is open for everyone here. Do you think that the way we are doing these policies help also this cross-country dimension that we mentioned at the beginning, right? Because we've been discussing a lot, of course, of the local solutions, but how do you think this international cross-country dimension entered, let's say, in the conversation, in the solution that we are building? That's a difficult one.
I think this is where sort of like this equity by design. So understanding actually what types of things need to be going onto vehicles to ensure equity. And this actually, by understanding this, so how we can report back up to the European Commission, so they can then feed guidance back down, or even legislation, regulation back down to across Europe and things. This then also becomes useful to the manufacturers of the different types of vehicles, because then they actually know what they need to be producing, because they don't just want to be able to sell something in one country, they want to be able to sell across the Europe and potentially the world. So we need to be able to have that understanding of what Europe needs, so that we can get what our citizens want from these types of vehicles, as opposed to them being imported from other parts of the world that maybe haven't had quite the same understanding that we have gained here.
Thank you, Ruth. I have some comments on my own, but I'm not sure if anybody of the other speakers wants to comment also. Because my comment is that I agree, we as DTU have been also looking a little bit in the data from all the different demonstration sites. So it's a little bit our work to try to look at this dimension. And what emerges that, first of all, there were a lot of different needs that were actually the same across the countries, or solutions sorted that were the same across the country. And there was this very strong request from the industry to strong regulation. So the question wasn't the regularization, was clear regulation that we can embed in our long-term strategies, and as widely accepted as possible. So I think that was emerging quite strong from all the demonstration sides. So that was quite nice to read, actually. And okay, then I don't think I have to burn all of you until the last moment. So last opportunity from the public, if you have any question on for our speakers.
There's a question in the Q&A from Anthony.
Thank you.
What he says is, what adjacent technologies does the team think could support equitable adoption of CCAM? For example, digital IDs with accessible, inclusive needs defined, or anything, or what about smart data platforms?
So, and does anybody wants to answer this? Because I can partially answer that, but I think it'll be more interesting from you, as you are the regulators, let's say it this way, or closer to that. So is there any technology that you're thinking to develop together with the CCAM, essentially in tandem, so that you can also essentially use to support essentially this equitable adoption of CCAM?
Well, let me answer, maybe if I got it right, okay? One thing that people like pointed that they need is some kind of guidance and some kind of, let me say it that way, some button or some kind of interaction with human, okay? Even though it's fully automatically. So they need, when they stuck with, I don't know, something happened and they don't know how to react, they need something to push and then somebody will answer. This is something that I think the most obvious thing that they wanted, if I got this question right.
I'm not sure it was, but I think it was the right actually point, because of course telecommunication and digitalization we discussed a lot, but I think Yaniv is right. So the technology need to ensure safety not only on board but also in terms of rescue operations. So the entire infrastructure has to be designed around this concept, I think. So I hope this question answer, Anthony. Otherwise, you can also feel free to ask again. But in the meantime, there was another question which was reflecting your various CCAM projects. What are the vital elements and aspects that enable successful CCAM passenger deployment? So what elements will enable to deploy CCAMs for essentially passenger deployment? I suspect is opposed as freight, but also probably is afraid of private transport, as opposed to just private transport.
I think
So,
if I can answer, I think again, if I just got it right, the question, I think like what make it like element that we need like to bring this kind of CCAM technology to be alive in our area. Yeah, if this is the question.
yes, but to be alive for passenger. So assuming the concept of public transport, because not just private transport, but in the concept of public transport, essentially.
Well, again, we talked about it in the webinar. I think that regulation is the most important element that we need because it's the green light for us. Like if the technology is here and it's running compared to the regulation that really slows down. So I think if we have like the green light from the regulation, then this is the most vital element that we need to solve. Even though like starting now, like for Israel, for example, like we started to bring it more and more fashionably here to our place.
Okay.
Maybe I can shortly add on. So we talk a lot about participatory experiments, engagement of citizens, and aligning citizens' expectations and needs with the actual technological implementation is of utmost importance. One challenge we have is that citizens can imagine what an autonomous vehicle will look like, but they never experienced it before. So they will most likely say yes. In Karlsruhe, we used virtual reality to align the citizens' expectations with the real technological implementations in a virtual setting. And I have to say that this was a very good way to align the expectations with the actual technical implementation, although it's of course virtual, but it can help to show the experience, to make it more tangible. So this is one of the elements we used here in Karlsruhe, which definitely helped us to shape the whole experience as it is so far.
Thank you a lot, Maximilian. And I'll very quickly on my own, just that one thing that I think is very important for passenger deployment is scalability, again, in the sense of dimension of the vehicle. If we want to replace large buses, we need also large buses, obviously. And also operation outside the city centers, which in some aspects is easier and in some aspects is more difficult. So understanding the concrete challenges when we scale up, I think is important. And with this, I really like to thank again everybody from the panel, but also everybody who took the time today to listen about our insights. I really invite you to actually follow us on the social medias and also on our website for all the most updated information from deliverables to scientific publications to articles about the activities that we do. So thank you very much, everybody, and wish you a very nice rest of the day.